Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Street Fighter podcast, as well as the next episode of the Street Fighter 5 podcast.
49?
Whatever. Welcome to the Street Fighter 5 podcast.
This is the continuation of the Street Fighter 5 podcast. We're branching off. We're now the Street Fighter podcast.
Yeah, so for audio listeners, you might not notice a difference at all, other than the fact that we haven't been recording anything for months. For YouTube versions, it's actually on a completely different channel, so you'll know that if you're watching this live. Or not live.
Not live, yeah.
But just watching it.
If you're watching the recording of this.
But we've got a different format we're going to be kind of playing with a little bit. I made a YouTube video. Did you watch it?
I did watch some of it.
Okay.
just to be completely honest, like I started watching it and then I got sidetracked with something else.
Okay.
So I apologize.
So I think I don't know what the title of this episode is going to be yet, as of
We'll get
talking
there.
about this. But the
Sure
one I
there'll
have,
be-
like,
I'm sure there'll be an inside joke or something that comes up.
well, the working title is Grooming for Street Fighter 6. Or
Okay.
Test Bed for Street Fighter 6. I'm going to kind of play with that a little bit.
Is
But-
Street Fighter 5 a test bed?
Well,
Ask the
that's-
question.
I just don't want to use the word Street Fighter too many times in the title.
But the podcast,
Sure.
it's named Street
Well,
Fighter.
yeah, I know, but it's like Street Fighter podcast, and then like and then you have to like not use.
You could
the name.
you could just say is 5 a test
Okay.
bed for
Well, I'll
for future versions.
I'll figure it out. But okay, so before we even jump into
That's
the
the question
main
we're asking.
the main topic, the main show notes here, I wanted to ask you a question, and I wanted to kind of get a leg up on you because I wanted to think about my answer first, but I didn't write it down. Which was, if you had to rank the Street Fighter games, what is your favorite Street Fighter game to your worst Street Fighter game by series?
By series.
Yeah,
So
so like-
pick an alpha, pick a 3,
Yes.
pick a 2. Okay.
I thought about this when I was on break the other day, and I didn't write it down, but I want to see what yours are.
Are we excluding 5 and
No.
Oh,
5's in there.
all right. Well, I still think the most. I'll just go from most recent go into the past. I still think that the most recent version of 5 is probably the best. So
It's your favorite Street Fighter game?
No.
This is I'm ranking best Street Fighter game to worst Street Fighter game.
Best.
For you.
Okay, best overall.
Yeah, most favorite to least favorite.
Okay, even though I'm not great at it. Oh man.
You want me to go first so I can
no,
kind of
no.
give you an idea how this works?
No, I get it. I get it now. I really want to say Street Fighter 3 Third Strike is my favorite, but it's not.
Okay.
I really enjoy Third Strike, but I think that Street Fighter 4 Ultra is my favorite.
Okay.
Overall, just because that's the one that I played the most, felt like I was the most competitive at, had the most fun playing against other people, had the highest the skill ceiling. Really felt like we were always watching something that could just keep going and getting better.
Okay. So your
year after
favorite
year.
your favorite Street Fighter game is
I think
Street Fighter 4?
I think it's Ultra. Yeah.
Okay. And then
Not including the Omega portion of that. Okay, so after that, probably Alpha 2,
ooh, okay.
and then Alpha 3.
No, one alpha.
Oh, just one Alpha?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, so Alpha 2, and then Third Strike. Oh, wait.
This is what I was kind of hoping would happen.
This is tough.
This is what I was hoping would happen.
I really, really liked Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Man, that might edge out Alpha 2. All right, so I'm gonna go back. Ultra Street Fighter 4,
All right. It's one.
Third Strike,
Okay.
and then Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo,
Okay.
and then Alpha 2.
Okay.
And I don't think Street Fighter 1 really counts.
No. So then 5 is at the bottom?
I mean, it's definitely below all those others. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I was thinking the same thing. So when I came up with it, I was like, I'm going to hit Roddy with this question when we record. Mine is
Thanks for that.
Super Street Fighter 4.
Okay, super interesting.
Yeah, Super Street Fighter 4 is my favorite Street Fighter game.
I did have a lot of fun with Super.
And then I'm going to go with Street Fighter Alpha 2. So I think we match up there. After that, I'm going to go with Second Impact, specifically from Street Fighter 3. Yeah, that was the one I played the most.
Okay.
So
Man, the
I have those memories.
Second Impact had some amazing looking stages.
Yeah.
It really did have the best stage artwork.
Then I'm going to go with Super Street Fighter 2.
Not Turbo.
Nope. I'm going to go Super Street Fighter 2.
The new challengers.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That was the one that I remember the clearest and like I played the most. And then after that, I'm going to go with Street Fighter 5. So in both cases, and I kind of like it's not to gripe on Street Fighter V, but when I was thinking about this question, when I was just like walking, on my break, I was thinking, is Street Fighter V the worst game out of the Street Fighters? And it's not to say it's a bad game, but it is the weakest.
If you include Street Fighter 1, it's not.
Well, no, nobody includes Street Fighter 1. Street Fighter 1 doesn't count.
It's still better than Street Fighter 2, the original.
And I was thinking about all these hot takes. So I was thinking about like my Star Wars rankings, which everybody gives me crap about.
You shouldn't even mention those here.
Well, I can at least say Return of the Jedi is my favorite.
Okay, you can say that. You're allowed.
But after that, everything's kind of...
But after that, I control your opinions.
Yeah. And then but I was thinking like Rocky, and then I was thinking about just like other Assassin's Creed, like other games. I was thinking about all these different games that have like these numbered... or these other franchises that have these numbered games in them. And I was thinking, yeah, Street Fighter. And it's weird to say Street Fighter V is at the bottom, but... we'd have to see like how things go. I mean, it'd be not that we'd be recording this podcast then, but it'd be interesting to see what it would look like 5 years from now.
We need to do a 5-year challenge.
I don't know. I'm not even going to care at that point. Okay, so the main kind of the thing that's going to be a little bit.
I have something that I feel like needs to be interjected here.
Okay.
Despite Street Fighter V being at the bottom of both of our lists, I don't think that it's now a bad game.
No, not now.
And I don't think that... I also don't think that there's a very wide gulf of qualities that make some of the other games better in our, whatever it means, opinion.
I'm basing my opinion too, and people can leave their thoughts on which ones they think is their favorites too.
Yeah, that's a pretty great comment. Leave your
favorite Street Fighters.
Favorite Street Fighters, one from each series ranked,
I mean, for me,
one to whatever.
For me, it's obviously subjective, but for me, it's entirely where I was in my life at that point, and kind of like how much I enjoyed that thing. And I think that like that's really what it comes down to, is like how you feel about something. I mean, and I think in a way that's kind of why I put Street Fighter V at the bottom and Street Fighter 4 at the top is, I mean, depending on how many more episodes of this we do or how many different discussions we explore with Street Fighter, the biggest thing for me is really like, if I was like, as an example with like DDR, right? When I went through my DDR phase, for me, the reason why Third Strike isn't on that list, even though I acknowledge it's probably the strongest of the Street Fighter 3 games, is because I wasn't playing it that much.
Yeah.
So because I wasn't playing it that much, the game that I was kind of like competing in or going heavy in was Street Fighter Second Impact. So for me, that's the best Street Fighter. Just like if I was basing like Soul Calibur, I think overwhelmingly the opinion for Soul Calibur would be 2 is probably the best out of all the Soul Calibur games. For me, it's 3. So which is considered the worst, one of the worst ones. So. I think
I have no opinion on Soul Calibur. I liked the games. I didn't get into them competitively. So.
Guilty Gear for me. I mean, did you play much Guilty Gear?
Very, very little.
For me, Slash. Slash is like the equivalent of Ultra. It's like probably the cleanest, most refined of all the Guilty Gear games before Xrd came in.
Where was that in the series?
Guilty Gear X, Guilty Gear X2, Guilty Gear X2 Reload, and then Guilty Gear Slash.
Okay.
And then Accent Core.
Okay.
And then Accent Core Plus.
Yeah.
And then after that, it switched over to Xrd.
Okay.
So it's 4 games in. It's 4 games in. But the point is, it's just kind of where my headspace was, and each one of those games, it's kind of like how I felt. And I felt good. I felt like not just winning, even when I was losing, it just kind of felt like I liked this game and I had fun with it. We talked right before we started recording about like Spider-Man. It's like Spider-Man made me feel good. I mean, I kind of take like it's a good game out of it. I just felt amazing when I was playing the game, and I was like, yeah, it's cool to be this hero.
Talking about Spider-Man on the Super Nintendo, by the way.
So and that's why I kind of wanted to ask you. So I was just kind of curious. Do you feel the same way as far as like you put Street Fighter V at the bottom because of how you felt about the other ones, like how much you enjoyed those other ones?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So relative, it's absolutely relative to the other games. If I were to approach it qualitatively, I think they might end up in a slightly different order.
Yes.
Because
you're right.
I think that probably Third Strike would end up at the top if I did that. Mm-hmm. Just because of the amount of hard, grueling work that went into creating all of those frames of pixel art. So on the development side, it's very impressive. The engine is solid, and the skill ceiling is extremely high.
It's the best looking Street Fighter game.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
But I also really enjoy pixel art, so that colors my perception. But the amount of just grueling work that goes into creating a game, a 2D fighting game, and launching it as an arcade title, and then having it out there in that era where there were no weekly, monthly patches where you could deal with a situation as it arose, that's it took guts, I think, to create a title and launch it. Even if you were going to do updates yearly, that's all you had. So, and that's all we had too for the previous games. For the previous games in the Street Fighter 2 series as well, we had those yearly or semi-yearly updates with Champion Edition and then Super and Turbo. Well, Turbo came before Super, and then Super, and then Super Turbo. Like those all came. Those are all incremental updates, sure, but that's the only method that Capcom had to release those games, and so I think that there is more to be said for releasing a title on a platform that's as static as an arcade cabinet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
in my opinion, that's why I think that ranking those qualitatively would shift.
And those titles would also shift based on like whatever categorization you're using. So if I said well, which one had the best music, then obviously that order is going to shift. But
right.
when I say like overall, like if you were to like how you feel about each one in particular, I think because like I said, I think I won't talk about Star Wars in depth, but I feel like Last Jedi, just real quick, Last Jedi might be the best looking Star Wars movie. Not because it's the most recent, but it looks the most like Star Wars. It has kind of like just with the way it like the technical aspect of it.
I guess I could see that.
I think it's the best looking Star Wars, but it's probably the worst out of all of them.
I'm of the same opinion.
Yeah,
I know that there are people who've made arguments for that movie, but
they're wrong. This is a Star Wars podcast.
I don't get it.
So yeah, but I thought about that with Street Fighter. I think Street Fighter is probably the best made Street Fighter game. Street Fighter 5.
Street Fighter 5 is?
Yeah, I think it's probably the best made Street Fighter game, but at the same time, it's probably still the weakest, in my opinion. Like it's when we move on to the next one, assuming that there's going to be one.
I'm sure there will be a Street Fighter 6. I'm just not sure how soon that's coming.
Assuming that there is going to be a Street Fighter 6, I will definitely get rid of this one. Like I wouldn't even think back on it.
I could drop 5 at
drop a hat.
I was going to say that, but it doesn't really make sense. I could drop the game at the drop of a hat. No. I could drop the game with the hat.
So the main show notes that we kind of wanted to get into, we're about 12 minutes in, but the main podcast show notes, something that we're doing a little bit different, is that I'm going to have less bulleted points, which means that I won't be kind of trying to cram things in as much. So we have 4 here, technically 3, because one's kind of like a subtopic.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously this is going to sound a little bit dated, but the main question I have here that I'm starting to share with, of course, Rodney and Elon when he's here, is whether or not if Street Fighter 5 was a test bed for Street Fighter 6 or a new fighting game title. And then we kind of jump into sponsorship ads here in a second, but it's something that I think we kind of talked about or explored that at one point in the past. I heard Event Hubs on one of their podcasts were talking about that, where I think someone with their website had talked to Capcom and asked if Omega Mode was at all used for Street Fighter 5 or the next Street Fighter game, back when it was only Street Fighter 4, and of course they couldn't say, we're drawing inspiration for that for the next Street Fighter game. So they said no. And then, they still said no. They've never really come out and said that it is, but you can see a lot of things coming
so many lessons were learned from Omega Mode.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like, especially coming, I think for me, looking at Street Fighter 5, probably Season 3, I think if I really wanted to sit down and scrub through it, I think you could see that there's a lot at that point where they were just like, okay, let's start seeing what people would tolerate. As far as like balance, as far as like the way the store is presented, as far as like fight money changes, let's see how people react to this stuff, and let's not do that or do that, depending on how it's received, for the next one.
Well, they did make a quick turnaround when it came to advertisements in game, and that were just all over the place at Capcom Cup.
Oh yeah, man, dude, that was.
Even Sajam came out against it after that. He said he wouldn't talk about those ads at all. Yeah, while they were on screen.
It was weird that they were at the event. Like, it's like you're already there.
Yeah.
It seemed weird to me, but
I think I had mentioned this I don't remember if it was on Twitter or if it was here on the podcast, maybe one of our last episodes, where I talked about Capcom feeling the need to dog food. So they put out the ads so that everybody could use them, and then they felt the need to show their own willingness to use what they had produced. Mm-hmm. So that's called dog fooding, right? If you use your own product, well, that's what I felt like. They felt the need to do that, and they really didn't. It just wasn't a thing that needed to happen. Like, even if they had it on for, I don't know, an hour or so of matches at the beginning, maybe the beginning of finals, but just they didn't need to have it the whole time. It was just annoying, and that's all they ended up being was annoying.
Yeah, well, we talked there was one recording that we did before, when I was kind of getting everything set up again to make sure it all worked. We did one recording where we'll reiterate it here, is about the game winding down or it being any sort of experiment for Street Fighter going free to play, either with the rest of 5 or 6. I don't think so. It's kind of funny to see Mortal Kombat 11 just recently get announced and show the gameplay, because something that I think is kind of fascinating about Mortal Kombat 11 is Street Fighter has been a leading title as far as fighting games, obviously, right? And I feel like they've had the Capcom, the developers of the fighting game, I feel like they've had the fortune of kind of like, we're just going to do it this way and everyone else follows suit. If you want to, because this is what works.
Yep.
And Keats, a long time ago, Keats was saying that a big part of the way Killer Instinct was kind of built up was from Street Fighter 4, But I think that, not to say that there's really like too much of competition as far as like, it's Mortal Kombat 11 and Street Fighter 5. But I think that when I was watching Mortal Kombat 11, despite all the gore that game has, it's violent, it's brutal. But I still kind of felt like this is a really cool looking game. And it seems like the mechanics are there. I like that the reception is there. Everybody's really on top of this. It's
interesting to see them taking new direction with cooldowns, stuff that you usually see aspects of other games. Like in this case, they likened that to either MOBAs or to an MMO. Where you would see a move on cooldown and you couldn't use it again until it was ready to be used.
Right.
Which is kind of alien to most... It's alien to the feel of most fighting games. Like, I don't think I've seen a cooldown in a fighting game yet. I've obviously... Like, there's something that acts kind of in a similar fashion. You have to build up a meter in order to be able to use that move again, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's a different feel. It's not a set amount of time. It's how fast can you do the thing, whatever the requirement is, to build up that meter, which is a different feel. So it's interesting to see, well, I was going to say Midway, NetherRealm taking those steps to move the franchise forward and then to move fighting games forward. So they're the ones now that have taken that first step.
I think it's really cool, too, that, I feel like it's kind of the elephant in the room subject here, but the fact that it's an American company. And the fact that one of the things that Ed Boon said that I keyed into when I was watching the live stream was just the idea that they showed Baraka. Baraka comes back from Mortal Kombat 2.
Yep.
And it's a shame that he was awful in Mortal Kombat 2, but I
loved him.
But he was cool looking, and everyone wanted to play Baraka.
Yeah.
So when they're hitting Mortal Kombat 11, they're like, he specifically said like, hey, he's a Mortal Kombat 2 favorite. We understand that the audience really, vibes to, Baraka. So one of the first characters they show you is Baraka, and it just kind of like spoke to the idea that, oh yeah, they know exactly kind of what people want to see in the next Mortal Kombat.
Which makes me wonder what Capcom was listening to, like who they were listening to when 5 was on the drawing board. I know it wasn't just Capcom responsible for this; it was Dimps as well, right? Dimps worked with Capcom, which is so surprising to me, because Dimps worked with Capcom on Street Fighter 4, which ended up being a superior product in most ways.
There are some things that the infamous is now infamous the 2015 Evo Street Fighter panel where they talked about like some of the challenges with like having focus and why they went to the V-skill system. They went to that because they recognized that having this universal system like a focus, which was probably really based off of the universal overhead from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, that some characters could take advantage of it more.
I thought of it more like parry.
Didn't everybody press the same like 2 buttons in Third Strike and they got the overhead?
Oh yeah, just they got the overhead.
Yeah, it's the same 2 buttons and you get focus.
Sure.
Same 2 buttons and you get V skill.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was something that they kind of looked at, but I think that was more internal. I think that it looks like they were observing like, oh wow, look, Gen gets more off of this than a character like M. Bison, who's a charge character. So if he hits and he dashes forward,
he's lost charge.
Yeah, or it's really technical to keep that. So I feel like they kind of looked more at the game, and there's some times when I think that they do look at like what the audience is saying. Obviously, like the 8 frames of latency. There's been a few things that I think that you've kind of seen them change based on like reception. The rage quitting, obviously coming up with a system for that. But I think that as far as like the overall game design, like from the ground up, I think it's very much, you can still kind of tell it's them saying like, here's how it's going to go. And a video that we watched right before we started recording was the Corey Gaming. This wasn't the focus of the video, but it was the constitution of Street Fighter and how there really isn't one. But you can kind of see that at least with some of the NetherRealm games, it seems like there is a very kind of strict format they're willing to adhere to when it comes to making these Injustice games.
Is super violent. Check.
Yeah, but also the way it looks and feels. Like I saw.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at Mortal Kombat 11, not to harp on it, but it really does just look like a more up to date Mortal Kombat X
Or
10.
Injustice.
Yeah, but they all kind of look. But it's Street Fighter from 5 to 4.
It's a graphical shift.
It's a graphical shift, and also like the way it generally plays is a lot different.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak a little bit about the that video that you linked me, the How to Fix Street Fighter 5 video?
No.
Okay. Well, the only thing I'll mention from it that I think is the takeaway, and I may have a link for this.
I just thought I sent this to you just because I thought that you might find it interesting. It was another person's opinion, another reflection on how to make Street Fighter V a better game. But
Which, yeah, it's not going to happen.
I know it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's
going to continue on its path. That's what's going to happen.
It's cool that people make those analysis videos. I mean, I made an analysis video like that years ago for Street Fighter V. It sounds weird to say years ago for Street Fighter V.
Years?
Has
it really been that long?
Maybe it was last year. I mean, I made it coming out of season 2. Whatever. Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
kind of the point.
Yeah.
The point is that like it's very clear that the developers of the game are going they have like a path they're on, and they're not really going to deviate from it too much. But the basis of the How to Fix Street Fighter V video that I'll link in the description is that it's where the thing I took away from it is the space at where the game is played. And using Street Fighter 3, since that's one that people really obviously resonate with, that one, it's a lot more footsie oriented. Like there are some times you can get mollywopped quick if you kind of leave yourself open in the wrong place. I was looking at that came through. I'm always nervous.
Oh.
Okay, give me a second. Okay, I'm always nervous that like whenever I see anything happen,
it's still like stopping and starting.
No, that's just the zoom. Don't worry about that. That's good.
Oh, okay.
Hey, you make me nervous. You make me nervous.
That's making me nervous.
But don't worry about it. I think it's good. So the basis is just where the fighting takes place. As far as like with Street Fighter 3, it's a little bit more footsie oriented. But in Street Fighter 5, that area is much closer together.
Yes.
And so because that area is closer, because you have to be closer inherently to fight each other, with punishing is a lot more difficult, regardless of how many frames someone takes to recover from their move. That is inherently going to always make the game more offensive.
And that's something that I think that's part of the NetherRealm constitution for making their own fighting games. They want to make sure that whiff punishing is a thing that you can do. Mm-hmm. Those moves, like if you look at their frame data, all of the moves in those games is pretty slow, especially when you compare it to something like Guilty Gear or Street Fighter.
Yeah.
They're super slow.
Mm-hmm.
Not that makes it that much easier to do. It's just that now it's possible. It's possible for, I'd say like probably the majority of players.
Yeah.
If you know what you're looking for and you've played the game enough, you could probably whiff punish relatively with relative success.
Yeah. I mean, it's and like you said, it's just different games.
Yeah.
I mean, something that we kind of talked about in one of the test recordings was, and I want to revisit this, was people thinking that the game was winding down. I don't really think that that's like an opinion anymore. I think now the opinion has shifted to how is the community opinion is what is different about Street Fighter V in 2019 as opposed to the previous years with no season pass and things like that. I don't necessarily think it's winding down. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, it could very well be that they just announced out of nowhere Street Fighter V is free to play now.
God, I hope that they never do that. That should not
5
be a
or
thing.
just 6 or
5.
whatever.
5 should not be. I don't think any Street Fighter should ever be free to play. I don't think any flagship title should ever be free to play.
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that.
As far as Street Fighter is concerned, I don't think they shouldn't skip to 6 and say, "Oh, it's free to play now." Like that should not be a thing. Mm-hmm. This is not. It's not a title that requires experimentation, in so much as the way it's monetized on a per character basis. If you're going to do Street Fighter 6, you move forward with the franchise,
right.
Have a full roster of 16 to 20 characters to begin with. If you want to do character packs or single character DLC, that's a thing that will probably happen, so we probably just have to accept it. It depends on how you present it to the community. Obviously, there are certain things that people in the fighting game community expect when it comes to the presentation of DLC. You don't want to buy a season pass and not see the characters beforehand. That's not a thing that should ever happen again.
Right.
There are certain missteps that Capcom should have learned from with Street Fighter V that should not be repeated. That's one of them.
Yeah. I mean, I'll ask, this isn't really on our list in a way, or I can kind of jump down to this one, where one of the questions I kind of ask sometimes, like when I think about this stuff myself is, can future Street Fighter seasons or games succeed without a competitive Pro Tour? I did watch a very long, uncensored episode with James Chen talking about just like what things are looking like and his concerns with the fighting game community going into 2019. I mean, I won't really kind of hit those here because it's very long, but something that always kind of comes up, I think, at some point in a discussion is, with these Pro Tours, Tekken, Dragon Ball, Capcom Pro Tour, with these Pro Tours going on, it's obviously, you can see that these companies are, they're like taking control of their IP. And it's funny because, not to come across like an I told you so, but it was something that I thought was so interesting to hear when people were saying that they didn't want MLG to kind of come into the fighting game community because they would dictate how things go. Yeah. Capcom's been doing that. Like, It's just, I mean, it just feels like, but because they're having like the commentators as like FGC people, because they're doing it a specific way, they are still very much taking control of their own IP.
They're taking control of certain aspects. Yes. But the tournaments are still run by members of the community. So I think that despite the fact that you are correct, they are trying to take control of the IP and how it's presented out to the greater esports world and try to attract more viewership. They're still allowing grassroots to have its place in the fighting game community and in the tournament scene. So the very fact that we have Ultra David and James Chen and Sajam, who else is a great commentator? It's like
Tasty Steve.
Steve, thank you, Tasty Steve. Yeah,
yeah. I know if we're talking specifically Street Fighter.
I was just like looking at commentators because they're really I think they're the product of what people in the community wanted when it came to tournaments. Like if you're watching a stream, you want to hear somebody who knows their stuff. You want somebody who's entertaining to listen to and can come up with silly things on the fly to compare, like make a metaphor about the particular situation.
You also kind of want someone that you can identify with to some capacity, which is why it's useful and advantageous to pull in a commentator like a Seth Killian because you know that they go so far back, with the scene. Whereas if you just take, I mean, this is going to happen a little bit. Justin Wong kind of jokes sometimes on Twitter that like he's like, how do I get into the commentator game? And the joke sometimes is that even if you were a really super good player and you jump on commentary and you don't know you are a great player but you can't really commentate very well, it almost becomes like why don't you just go back to playing the game? Because you obviously you're not this good.
You have to be an entertainer of sorts to be a commentator. Like it's not an easy job.
Sure.
And you absolutely have to have some experience and have gotten your feet wet at some point. You can't just jump into it from being a player.
One of the concerns that I have too about Street Fighter, I mean, I guess other fighting games, but Street Fighter in general, obviously, is just the idea that, and I put grassroots kind of in quotes here, in part because we saw from the Tekken World Tournament, Tekken World Finals, Tekken World Tour, I think is what it's called.
I don't know.
TWT.
Sure.
So with the Tekken tournaments, we saw that the players didn't really get that much money from placing first. It was very, very low compared to some of the Capcom Pro Tour.
I don't watch anything Tekken related, so I'm pretty Tekken stupid.
Okay, yeah, I am too. It popped up kind of in my feed of just like how little the amount of money was for first place for that tournament series as opposed to Capcom's tournament series. And that is run by an actual company. So there are some adjustments that I think are being discussed where Harada might be taking over, and maybe that money will increase over time. But one of the concerns that those people had was that, like, hey, it costs a whole lot of money to travel around and do this stuff, and I actually end up kind of spending more money to kind of get around than I do if I win, right? Which is very difficult to do, and there's a sacrifice that come with that, training and things like that. So
that's the way fighting game tournaments have pretty much always been up until the last few years.
Yes, and that was my point, is that like if you take away the 270,000 Capcom Pro Tour and it becomes tournament organizers running it on their own again. I mean, I think obviously that would still happen. Like, I think there still would be a SoCal regionals, NorCal regionals. Those events would still happen,
but
I think
won't be as big.
They won't be as big, and I think the draw to come out and compete in them won't be as big a deal because it's like, well, if you win first place, Capcom's throwing in this much money, so you can make whatever the amount is for first. It's like 10,000.
Sure.
But if that number is now 2,000 or 3,000, then it becomes, well, what am I really getting out of this if I go? And I think what you'll start to see is kind of an implosion in a way where people just won't travel as much. So
back to the good old days.
Right, and then it just becomes a full circle again, where it becomes
necessarily good. Huh? They aren't necessarily good.
No, I mean,
in some respects. Not from
a pro tour, not from a tournament standpoint. Like
Yeah.
living off of being a professional gamer,
right?
From that perspective, and that's kind of what we saw a little bit. I don't know if you heard about it at all, but it's not Hearthstone. What is that other game that Blizzard makes?
The Blizzard makes? Oh, Heroes of the Storm?
Yeah, Heroes of the Storm, where something like that had kind of happened. And it's funny because it kind of got brought up, over the weeks, months we've been away. But in when that hit, obviously the fighting game tournament, scene kind of heard about it. And that was the big concern, too.
Yeah, you start to take a look at yourself at that point. You're like, wait, if that happened to a game with a company as large and as substantial, with as much of a footprint as Blizzard, what's going to happen to Street Fighter?
Yeah.
What could happen to Street Fighter?
Right. So it's, that's a concern. So I think, my opinion on it, though, overall, as far as like the question being, would the game be successful? I think the game would be, sure. I think it could be. It'd
6?
be okay.
Like if we move to 6?
Yeah, I think it would be okay.
I think it depends entirely on if whoever's the developer behind the next game, if they take the lessons that have been so loudly shouted from rooftops and screamed about in the streets, and I'm sure there has been some amount of blood flowing in the rivers. Let the rivers flow with the blood of the non-believers.
Yeah.
If they don't take those lessons to heart and really just pay attention to what the community has said over the last 5 years.
It's so funny, too, because it's, the joke I kind of make about not even just the Street Fighter community, but just like the fighting game community is that it's almost really easy to know what it is you need to focus on if you were making the next game, because it's always the same 3 or 4 complaints. It's usually like some kind of lag, some sort of like rage quitting, some sort of latency and lag, but like obviously like the 8 frames. You know.
So there's input lag input latency, and then the amount of lag that you get on a network connection.
Yeah, I would say that's 1.
There's only so much you can do about network disparity between players.
Sure. 2, balance is, that one's always the hardest because that's usually like subjective. Sometimes there's some situations where characters are just like ridiculously too good. And
Street Fighter 3 Third Strike.
Yeah, but that's such a long time ago now.
It is a long time ago.
And
I think that that problem developed,
I don't think that'll happen again.
Probably. It's possible. It's still possible that could happen.
Even now, like when people were saying like, Abigail was too strong, it's like, yeah, but I don't think he was really as bad. I don't think he was that bad. He had, like his V-Trigger 1 as an example, like how it lasted as long as it did for being a 2-bar V-Trigger, and they changed that being 3. Sure, okay, but like, it wasn't like he was so overbearingly difficult to beat that it required something like that. So I just don't think we'll see it in that level. Season 1 of this game with like Chun-Li and Nash, remember everybody's list had like Chun-Li and Nash in there? Yeah. And then there was that perception where people were like, oh, well, we're just starting to figure them out, because Nash was starting to
dominate.
Well, no, he was starting to lose a little bit.
At the end
by the
of
time
the
it got to Evo. By the time it got to Evo, it was like people were starting to figure out how to fight him.
Yeah.
But there's some elements you can see in Nash's like game plan where you could like he was a little bit too good, but I don't think it's that bad. I don't think he would have remained on the top for too much longer.
Yeah, and he got nerfed into the ground.
He's making his way back up, coming out of the grave like an actual lore. So I don't know. That's
so sad about that. I like Nash.
You still playing him?
No.
Are you playing at all?
I liked Nash. I played for, I don't know, maybe a half an hour last week. Mm-hmm. So no, not really. I plugged the game back in and I was like, maybe I'll get back into it now that season 4 has started, and I really haven't. I actually did play against one of our listeners.
Okay.
And he hit me up on Twitter afterwards. He mollywopped me with Alex, which I was just not used to having had happen to me. But I mean, so I've played a couple times. I haven't really gotten back into it. I don't know, man. I think I've started up Street Fighter 4 on PS4 more often now than I have 5 in the last couple months.
It's a better game.
I just wish there were more people on it still.
Yeah, I haven't really played. I mean, I logged in after I was at Elon's place. I logged in to test the Ryu changes. I mentioned it kind of on Twitter, just a quick little thing. I was like, I think he's stronger, But I've always been of the opinion too, even in Season 3, and I know that there are Ryu players that would disagree with this. I was kind of the opinion. I think there were other characters that just kind of like outclassed him more so than he was just bad. Like, I think he was fine. I just think that, like, when you make a game where everyone has a way of getting around all of his tools, it makes him look awful. But it's not that he's awful. It's just that, like, oh, you throw a Hadoken, I can get around that. You do a Tatsu and it only hits standing opponents, like, then you're forced into these things. But now it's like he can... I don't want to get too much into the patch details, but he has ways of kind of being more consistent, and I think that things like his Hadoken change, things like his donkey kick change. I think he's fine. I think he was fine before anyway. So
yeah, I looked through the patch notes briefly for like Akuma and Urien, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me anymore.
But also,
if I'm going to play the game, I will play the game in I guess in a state of blissful ignorance.
Yeah, what's kind of also affects me a lot too is just the fact that there's so many other games out there that are really good, and sometimes I feel like
Spider-Man.
Oh, like Spider-Man, dude! Like we got to almost do like a separate thing for that, because we got to get in on Spider-Man, dude.
Yeah.
And then, real quick though, with Spider-Man, he's had such.
This was my plan all along.
He's had such a great couple years, right? We had
it's
Civil War.
Been ridiculous.
We had Civil War. We had Homecoming.
Yeah.
Got a Infinity War.
Yeah.
Got the PS4 game and then Spider-Verse.
Spider-Verse is so good.
I mean, the Spider-Man name has been crazy. But just kind of looping it back, I mean, like with Resident Evil coming out, I think next week. Then you have Sekiro.
Resident Evil 2, right? The remake?
The remake, yeah. Then you have Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice that's coming out
Sekiro,
late March.
Is that Capcom?
No.
Oh, that's just like, okay.
I think it's FromSoft. I think it's From Software, but it's also being published by Activision. I don't like Activision right now.
Yeah.
But there's that. Yeah, Devil May Cry 5.
May Cry 5, yep.
So it's just like, the thing that I sometimes feel very separate when it comes to, obviously, the fighting game community
like Ghost of Tsushima.
Is that, like, it's just so easy for me to just go do something else. Like, if I'm just not enjoying something.
Yeah, like that's the weirdest thing about Street Fighter V. I felt so driven to play 4 and to get better at 4 the entire time that series was running. Every single version of that game, I wanted to go play more. I wanted to get better. And with 5, I thought that I would get back there, that I would regain that feeling somehow, and that I would be driven again, and that never really happened. I obviously went to EVO a couple times, or was it once for Street Fighter 5 or twice?
Yeah, I think the first year we went.
Yeah, okay, so
we went 2016.
And then after that, I've just been... It's been so... I feel like I've been lazy with Street Fighter, which is weird for me. It's a feeling that I don't remember ever having before. Because even when Street Fighter 3 was out, and this was back when I was at UT, when I was in college.
Yeah.
That's when I was playing Street Fighter 3. And Alpha, actually, as well. But I remember being driven to go to the arcade. And at that point, there were 2 arcades on Guadalupe. I would go to Le Fun. I would go to Einstein's because they both had Street Fighter 3 machines. And depending on which one you went to, it either smelled like trash or you were trash. Le Fun smelled like trash all the time, and if you go to Einstein's, that's where everybody kind of played. That was where you were trash. But it was fun still, even getting your butt whooped. Like the games were usually in pretty decent repair, and good players were there, and you were driven to get better because somebody whooped you.
So we're gonna close out here in a second, but
okay.
I'm curious, kind of circling all the way back to the beginning in a way. After we talked about the ranking of the Street Fighter games. Do you think that a lot of what's being used for Street Fighter V is being incorporated into the next Street Fighter game? Or do you think that...
That depends on what you mean.
No, I mean, just like, the ads, the character roster, the lag, the interface, the store. I mean, the whole thing. Because I'm of the opinion, like I said, to close out, my final thoughts are that I think that pretty much starting at Season 3, so Arcade Edition, I think that's the point where it feels like someone higher up was like, okay...
Let's make this a proper title.
No. I feel like it's like, okay, here's the game. We have to support this. We've committed to supporting this for X amount of time. But here's what we're going to do to see what we can learn going into the next one. And I think Season 3 was kind of the start of that.
Okay. So the lessons learned up to that point were they were the result. Or rather, Arcade Edition was the result of those lessons.
No, I think that starting from Season 3, so starting from Arcade Edition, I think that everything that they've been doing is being used for Street Fighter 6, as far as like the way people are receiving, like the reception behind it.
I don't think I'd agree with that.
Okay.
I think what's going to go into the next game, assuming that it's being built, what's going into the next game is the knowledge of how these things affected the development time, how much money it costs to go back and redo menu systems, how much it costs so the UI, how much it costs to go back and redo the UI, how much it costs to go back and rejigger the frames so that, or the input lag, so that you would have fewer frames of input lag on a button press.
Okay.
So engine wise, like how much does it cost development time to do all of those things? How much does it cost to create the DLC costumes? Like they're trying to figure out. It seems like they've been trying to figure out for the last 4 years now. How much do we need? How much money do we need to consume on a monthly, yearly basis in order to make Street Fighter V, our current platform, viable for the foreseeable future of the title? Mm-hmm. So it's a game of money at this point,
yeah.
and they're trying to figure out how to balance the amount of development time that they're putting in with the amount of return, which is every software company's job. It's the same.
Absolutely.
It's the same. So what they should be taking away from this is we made a bunch of missteps with seasons one and 2, as well as with the base game, that we can't make again because they were much too costly. There was probably some point in time during the development process of those seasons where they thought, we can't continue doing this way.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree.
So and that's why you saw the changes actually be implemented. That's why they came to be. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we would have continued on with the same schlock that we started with.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have gotten players complaining about a thing and then having a result that changed that thing. In this case, let's say, for example, the rage quit system. So that was something that players complained about from day one after the beta stopped. Actually, I think they might have complained about it then too, just assuming that that was a beta thing. But it continued, so it had to change. Mm-hmm. So somebody had to shovel money into that problem. Each one of those problems that they've had to shovel money into post-release should have affected their future release cycles.
Yeah. Okay.
So TLDR, follow the money.
Yeah.
And follow the things that worked when they got produced the first time. Those are the lessons you take to Street Fighter 6.
All right. I'm okay with that.
Sorry, that was a really long.
No,
that was a long way to get around to that.
But
lesson.
and it's kind of funny too, because right when we close out here, I think it's kind of funny that what I was kind of hoping you would disagree in a sense, because I feel like we agree on a whole lot of stuff when it comes to opinions on Street Fighter.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, but when I listen to other people's content, like sometimes when I listen to like just not even outside Street Fighter, I mean just like other like movies or whatever.
Sure.
It's like, I think this about such and such, and somebody goes like, I disagree. I think, but we've like very much aligned with like a lot of stuff. So, like I said,
it makes it so fun to listen to.
Yeah, and like I said, my stance is that when I see stuff happen in Street Fighter, I feel like, I mean, I have no real bearing other than just like the way I feel about it. But sometimes I see things happen with Street Fighter, like the ads, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
And then, but like obviously, sometimes I feel like they're like, oh, well, maybe they do that. And they're going to kind of see, like, how are people going to receive this? Oh, not well? Cool. So when we move forward with Street Fighter, the franchise, we'll make sure to not do that if it's negatively received. Like, why put something into the next Street Fighter game if it's negative? Like, oh, people hated Rage Quit? Okay, well, the first thing we're going to do with the next Street Fighter game is we're not going to have a Rage Quit system. Oh, people really want to be able to chat in lobbies and stuff like that? Okay, in the next Street Fighter game, we're not doing that. Like, it just wouldn't make sense to do that. Yeah. And so I feel like some of these things that are happening, even though I'm not playing, and I see them come out in the news, I'm just like, wait, what? I was like, oh, wait, maybe they'll just remember that for the future. So
it's not... there's no maybe here. Those things must happen.
Sure.
Those lessons must be carried forward. Otherwise, all of Street Fighter V, the experiment that is Street Fighter V, has been a complete and utter waste.
It was all a dream. Yeah. All right, we're out of here. Have a good one.